The sidebar is the section responsible for displaying certain widgets, but before we can display those widgets, there are a few things we need to do first. So let's begin. Let's begin by registering a widget area. And this is what you need to do first before displaying any kind of content. You need to register an area or a sidebar, if you want to call it like that can be used to display widgets. For that, let's go into our functions PHP here, and let's copy this function because it already has some code that we can reuse. We'll do number 5 here. We'll do register widget areas. This will be called tuts widget init. Yeah, and inside we're going to start with this another check. If function exists, register sidebar. And this is a check just to make sure we're using a newer version of WordPress that actually supports sidebars. So if that function exists, we're going to call it, and we're going to pass in an array with several options. The first one is the name. So what's the name of the sidebar? In our case, we're going to use a translatable string, and we'll just call it main widget area. Next, we've got to give it an ID. So the ID, let's just do main sidebar. Next, we got to give it a description, and we'll also use a translatable string here. And then there are 4 parameters that will control how each widget is displayed. So we'll have before and after widget and before and after title. Now, if we look back on Corey's code here, in the sidebar, we'll see that each widget has a div with a class of widget, and each title is contained in an h2. Let's do this before widget, and we'll do this div with an ID of placeholder 1, class widget, and then placeholder 2. And these 2 placeholders will actually be replaced by WordPress with the appropriate ID and classes. Then we have an option for after widget that looks like this. And then we'll have before title and after title that look like this. So before title, we'll do h2. After, we'll close the h2. Finally, after this function, we'll do add action, widgets init, tuts widget init. And here we're basically saying, hey, WordPress, when you're executing the widgets init function, also execute our function, which allows us to register our own sidebar. So with this done, now if we go back to the WordPress backend, you'll see here in appearance that we have another section called widgets. And here we have the main widget area that we defined and its description. So now we can actually start putting widgets into this. Yeah, so let's do, for example, I don't know, archives and what else? Search, text, for example, recent posts. Let's put recent posts here. So now that we have a sidebar created, we have to display it. To do that, let's go back into index.php, and instead of sidebar here, we're going to do get sidebar. This is a function similar to get header and get footer that loads sidebar.php. Create that file, add the proper comment on the top, and then inside we'll do a check if is active sidebar main sidebar. So we're checking if the one we define actually exists, then we'll just load it. We'll call it dynamic sidebar main sidebar. And what that will do is, let's refresh. It will create the sidebar right here, archives, recent posts, and you'll see that if we decide to edit this one in the back end, it will reflect in the front end as well. So this is how you add a sidebar to a WordPress theme. Now we do have in here, we have a custom sidebar widget called recent projects, but we'll deal with that in a later lesson. And with the sidebar, we have now completed the index.php file, which is the default template that WordPress uses to display blog posts. Now, our page does not have any kind of CSS or JavaScript loaded. That's because we haven't loaded anything. If you remember, we removed everything from the header and the footer, the scripts that Corey was using previously. So let's go ahead and add those back, but in the correct manner for WordPress. That's coming up.